Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode we're talking about the Buffalo Bills 2024 NFL Draft Class review. And what we are going to be talking about today is all of the draft picks that the Bills selected to see what their potential is based on production, athleticism, and other statistical factors. So stay tuned until the end of the video where I give you my final grade on the Bills for their draft class. But let's get into a couple things. So first off, how do I grade these draft classes? Well, one thing I use is called draft pick approximate value. Every pick in the draft averages a certain AV or approximate value score, which you can go to Pro Football Reference to get that score. But this is the pick range. So anytime you pick between picks 1 through 5, you average a 98.84 out of 100 approximate value prospect, essentially. And if you draft a player who data wise is not going to meet that standard, then you would get less of a grade. So that's how I kind of am doing my data grades in terms of draft approximate value. And then, of course, you have EAV or expected approximate value grade, which is the ceiling grade or the data grade, if you will. This is the grade that takes a look at their production, athleticism, uh, physical metrics, and strength of schedule, strength of team. Every single number you could think of on a prospect is boiled down into one number. So it's kind of like RAS, but better in every single metric to kind of determine who is the best prospect or not based on long-term outcomes. And if you want to learn more about this approach and want to know the correlations with it, you can go to another video of mine, which is the top 50 prospect video that I did back before the draft. Check out that video, goes into detail on everything there. Now, limiting factors. So, what are some of the things that limit the data? This is what this deals with. And it could be the coaching of a team, it could be the media, psychological and mental makeup, unforeseen injuries, and substitution bias are the main things that can kind of limit the data to kind of make it not as effective in terms of predicting players. So, in other words, you might have a player who tests really well AV wise, but isn't really that great of a player because of these factors. Or the opposite, a player doesn't really test as well in all these factors right here, and it's because of all the factors that you see right there. Next up, let's get to the needs. So this is the Buffalo Bills roster prior to the draft. These are the best prospects they had on their team. Josh Allen, of course, is at the top of the list, and then you go down the list and you have wide receiver, defensive end, safeties is another area that's a little lackluster. Taking a look at the needs on offense, some of their biggest needs are running back and wide receiver, tight end and offensive line, not as much. Taking a look at the defensive side of the football, edge is a need for them as well as cornerback and safety. So these are the prospects that the Buffalo Bills should be targeting in the draft based on the approximate value of them on their roster that they had coming into the draft. Now, what are the biggest factors in terms of the final grade? These are the biggest factors. Did they meet their roster needs? It's a big one. Did they? I would say the needs are wide receiver, running back, safety, cornerback, and edge. So if they draft those prospects, we're good. Next up, did they draft good prospects? So if you draft a wide receiver that is not a good prospect, you're not really helping yourself out, are you? Same difference. Did they draft prospects that have the data potential to outperform their draft status? This is what makes my data grades a lot different than everybody else, or I should say draft grades, because people don't really do data grades except for me. Is I'm looking at their data. I'm looking at what their potential is, and typically, when prospects have a 70 or higher data score, they go on to become a long-term starter at every position you can imagine. If they have anything less than that, then they're considered a riskier prospect to a prospect that's probably going to end up become a practice squad reserve like player. And this isn't just me saying this. This is just what the data says. It's just factual basis based on thousands, if not tens of thousands of prospects over the years. Now, these are all the questions the data can give some answers to, and we will start to answer those questions now with the first pick selected by the Buffalo Bills and Keon Coleman, wide receiver out of Florida State. Data grade, he had an 88.30 out of 100 data grade. His floor grade is 72.06 out of 100, which means that all of the wide receivers drafted at his spot that had a similar 80 percentile data grade typically had an AV of 72.06 out of 100 was what their approximate value score was. The balanced grade, which takes a look at the data grade with the floor grade, is 80.18. And then the average AV of every prospect taken here, not just wide receivers, but every prospect taken at pick 33, is 86.10 out of 100. I would give this overall pick grade a B. I think it screams a B. He is a good prospect. There's a lot of people kind of hate on Keon Coleman, but he does have a lot of interesting data, which is what we're going to get to right now, which is his market share data. So one area that Keon Coleman does what relatively well, he's decent, is his market share data. So for example, he has a 67 percentile receiving market share production score, 77 percentile in terms of total offensive market share, and 72 in terms of touchdown market share. All those numbers are pretty decent at the position for him. Then, of course, you get to efficiency scores. This deals with touchdowns per touch and yards per reception. All those areas are pretty decent for Coleman as well, at least kind of above average to average in some ways. And then, of course, you have athleticism traits, which is where Coleman did good in one area and not so good in the other. He had 89 percentile in terms of explosiveness, with 42 percentile in terms of speed. So he's a little bit of a slower prospect based on his 40, but he did do really well in terms of explosiveness, which means that he is a wide receiver that can win with his lower body power, which I think is what they're looking for. Kind of a possession receiver, I think is the best way to put it. Then, of course, when you get to his adjusted production scores, adjusted production takes a look at their age, strength of schedule, strength of team, to see how well they produced for those factors there. And this is where he did exceptionally well. 98 percentile in terms of age, 85 percentile in terms of his MSA rating, and 83 percentile in terms of his pass score. So all these numbers essentially mean that Keon Coleman has the potential to be a Pro Bowl, potentially even All-Pro prospect if he goes to the right team in the right situation. The best sort of comparison for him, I would probably make it sort of an upper level comparison, would be like Michael Irving from the Dallas Cowboys and also formerly of the U. And then kind of a lower end prospect might be somebody like Dwayne Bowe, would be another sort of low end prospect for what you might expect out of him on the Bills. So that's kind of what you're looking at here. Next up, we have pick 60, Cole Bishop, safety out of Utah. His data grade is 81.86 out of 100. Projected floor grade is 72.06. His balance grade is 73.69 out of 100 with an average AV of 76.83 out of 100 for where he was selected. So the average AV of where he was selected is 76.83. I would give this overall pick a C based on where he was picked and his overall balance grade. Taking a look at his defensive market share production, because yes, I do look at defensive players in terms of market share data, and based on these numbers, he had a 73 percentile solo tackle score, 77 percentile in terms of interceptions, and 58 percentile in terms of pass deflections. His pass deflection data is not really where you want it to be in terms of the starter averages, but he's kind of like a strong safety. I know he's playing the free safety role, but his production traits were more indicative of like a strong safety type. Then, of course, you get to athleticism testing, which is where he did well here as well, with 79 percentile explosiveness and 84 percentile speed. So he has near elite athleticism overall, which is important at the safety position. Taking a look at his adjusted production scores at the position, he did well in terms of his pass score. His age is a little bit less than ideal at the position. So overall, good prospect. Not somebody I really see being elite long term, but definitely could be a starter for them, which is why they got a C for him. Next up, we have pick 95 and Dwayne Carter, defensive tackle out of Duke. His data grade is 88.95 out of 100. His projected floor grade is 62.01 out of 100, and his balance grade is 75.48, with the average AV of where he was selected being 57.92 out of 100. So in many ways, based on his overall data, he has the potential to be an 89 percentile defensive tackle long term. But based on where he was selected, most of those prospects end up being a 57 percentile like prospect. And his average floor grade, which is all the defensive tackles that tested like him, was 62 percentile. So he could either be a boom or bust type prospect, but he does have very good data. So taking a look at his defensive tackle market share data, he had a 71.47 solo tackle score. He had a 93.14 sack score and a 91 percentile in terms of tackles for loss. Based on his other market share scores in terms of forced fumbles, pass deflections, and interceptions. He did really well in terms of all those numbers right there. And in terms of athleticism traits, he had 82 percentile in terms of explosiveness, 76 percentile in terms of speed, and 36 percentile in terms of flexibility for his size. The biggest things that really are impressive is his near elite athleticism traits in terms of explosiveness and speed. Those are the two big things that I really like about Dwayne Carter, athletically speaking. And then adjusted production wise, he has an issue, which is his age. 22 percentile in terms of his age score. I know everybody hates people talk about age all day long, but the correlations are what they are. Look at the All Pro averages. Look at the Pro Bowl threshold. Look at the Pro Bowl average. Look at the Pro Bowl threshold. All those prospects are typically older, or I should say, younger prospects compared to Dwayne Carter. But he does have good production. That's the biggest thing that pushes his data up. And I would say that all of these factors make him somebody that I think could easily become a long-term starter for the Buffalo Bills based on his overall data. So he is a good prospect. He's probably one of the better defensive tackles in this draft class, and they got him pretty late. So I would say very good value here for them. Then, of course, we get to pick 128, which is Ray Davis, running back out of Kentucky. His data grade is 89.45 out of 100. His projected floor grade is 62.66. His balance grade is 76.06, and his pick AV is 50.19 out of 100. The overall pick grade for this would be a B based on his potential as a rusher. Taking a look at his data, he had very good market share production in terms of 80 percentile, 85 percentile in terms of receiving market share, and then 94 percentile in terms of touchdown market share. So, very, very productive player. Looking at his efficiency scores, he was very impressive in terms of TD percentage, not so much in terms of his touch AV or rec AV. And one important note to say, guys, is James Cook, the starting running back for them right now, was not that big of a touchdown guy. So Ray Davis might be the guy that starts getting the touchdowns for the Buffalo Bills, instead of uh, Josh Allen. So keep an eye on that. Keep a look on that. Then, of course, we get to athleticism traits. He had 75 percentile in terms of explosiveness, and 80 percentile in terms of speed, and 42 percentile in terms of flexibility for his size. He's pretty much almost identical to Dwayne Carter in terms of athleticism, at least for his position. So this is one interesting thing about it, and also age, because he's very old. Ray Davis is 2.83 percentile in terms of age. He does have a very good MSA rating and a pass rating. This is despite his age. So that was the one thing that I really liked about Ray Davis, or what made me excited about him, was he was very productive. He was athletic as well, and his age was very high, or I would say he's very old, but he was also very productive. So this is somebody that I think might be interesting to watch here. He might end up becoming the starting running back long term. I mean, it could also be more of a running back by committee system, but I like this pick for that way. Next up, we get to pick 141, Cedric Von Pran Granger. Based on his data grade, he had a 73.42 overall ceiling grade, 63.72 in terms of his floor, a balance grade of 68.57 out of 100, and his average AV for his selection is 52.51, with an overall pick grade of a D in terms of his data. Taking a look at the other aspects of him in terms of athleticism traits, he had a 52 percentile speed score with a 67 percentile flexibility score. Based on most centers, they don't need to be elite level athletes to be good centers at the position, but it helps. When you look at the All Pro averages, the Pro Bowl averages, and the starter averages, they're all above average athletes. So you don't have to be an elite athlete at the center position, but you do need to be at least above average. So we'll see what happens with this pick. He could be a starter, but there also are some concerns because he isn't quite an elite level athlete or even near elite. Then we get to pick 160 in Eddie Fawn, the linebacker from Washington. Data grade 77.20 out of 100. Projected floor grade 47.35. Balance grade is 62.28 out of 100. with the average AV for him being 36.29. His overall grade is a C based on his metric potential. Taking a look at the data for him, he had a 69 percentile solo tackle score, 77 percentile in terms of sacks, and 55 percentile in terms of tackles for loss. So he good productive linebacker from a solo tackle data perspective and sack data perspective. And his efficiency scores, he scored a 80 percentile in terms of forced fumble market share, with above average pass deflections and also above average interception. Oh, well, not above average, but average interceptions for the position. So his efficiency is decent, not really the best, but is okay. Then, of course, you get to athleticism traits. He had a 96 percentile explosion score, 90 percentile speed, and 32 percentile flexibility. Are we noticing a trend here? It seems like the Buffalo Bills don't care about short shuttles and three counts. Interesting. Then, of course, we get to his adjusted production scores, 74 percentile in terms of his MSA rating, 72 percentile in terms of pass, and his age score is 3.43 out of 100. So that's the way his data kind of shakes out in terms of adjusted production. Biggest question is his age. Big thing that keeps popping up, the age of the prospect. These are all very much older prospects in many ways that have good athleticism traits and good production traits. Then, of course, we get to pick 168 and Javon Solomon, edge from Troy. His data ceiling is 60.75 out of 100. His floor is 28.50. Balance grade is 44.57, and his pick AV is 24.32 out of 100. I would give this overall pick grade a F, mainly because of how low he scored and where he was drafted at. There's a very low shot that a player like this would break out at this spot here. I think you need to take a guy who's more in the 70, 80, 90 percentile of data to really be somebody who could outperform the draft status essentially. Taking a look at his edge rusher score, he had a 67 percentile solo tackle score, 87 percentile in terms of sacks, and 76 in terms of tackles for loss. Also, in terms of his other data, he had very good forced fumble market share, but below average pass deflection market share. Also, in terms of his athleticism traits, decent, 78 percentile in terms of his explosion testing, 64 percentile in terms of speed, and then 58 percentile in terms of flexibility for his size. So he's explosive, he's fast, but not quite the most flexible athlete at the position. Then, of course, you get to his adjusted production, where his age is an older prospect, but he is at least above average in terms of his MSA rating and his pass rating in terms of production. Biggest things that really drop him also is his level of competition. He played at Troy, he didn't play at Alabama, he didn't play at Michigan, he didn't play at like a high quality school. Because of that, it definitely hurts his adjusted production score. Then, of course, we get to pick 204, which is Tylen Grable, offensive tackle out of UCF. His data grade is 89.28 out of 100. His floor is 47.24. Balance grade is 44.57, with a pick AV of 24.32 out of 100. His overall pick grade would be a B, probably a high B. I'll give it a high B. When you look at his athleticism traits, 99 percentile in terms of explosiveness and 92 percentile in terms of speed for his size. Great overall athleticism traits for the position, but you kind of are taking a gamble on him. But this is exactly where you want to take a gamble on sort of project developmental tackles, is late in day 3. So good selection here for them. Then, of course, you get to pick 219 and Daquan Hardy, cornerback out of Penn State. His data grade is 30.35 out of 100. His projected floor grade is 37.85. Balance grade is 34.10. And his pick AV is 45.46 out of 100. The overall pick grade for this guy would be a F, because it's a very low shot of him making it, especially at this pick. Most of these players that are taken at 219 and the vast history of the draft don't really become much of anything, and then you're going to take a guy that has a very, very low data grade. It's not a good mix. So why did he test so poorly? Well, one is his solo tackle data. He had a 4.77 percentile solo tackle score. He did have good pass deflection data in the 84 percentile in terms of that particular metric. But also, you have to take a look at his athleticism traits, where he did test well as an athlete. 86 percentile in terms of explosiveness, 78 in terms of speed, and 51 in terms of flexibility. Are we noticing a theme here? Good explosion numbers, good speed numbers. Is he an older prospect? Let's find out. In terms of his adjusted production, he's not really the oldest prospect. He's kind of average age, but he does have a decent pass score overall. But the biggest thing that really kind of hurts him is his solo tackle data, is those other sort of traits that kind of drop him off. But he does have the potential to become a long-term starter with his athleticism traits, but this is not the best profile ever. Then, of course, we get to the last pick for the Buffalo Bills in pick 221, Travis Clayton, offensive tackle, not from rugby, but he's a player who plays, he played rugby, okay? The British rugby. His data grade is 64.110 out of 100. His projected floor grade is 32.05. And his balance grade is 54.67 out of 100 with a pick AV of 32.50 out of 100. The overall grade for this would be a D because of some of the concerns over his overall size and stuff like that. Now, athleticism wise, he did test well, 85 percentile in terms of speed, but 41 percentile in terms of flexibility for his size. Are we noticing a theme here? It seems like the Bills don't care about the short shuttle and three cone. Hmm? Hmm? Interesting. Overall, I would say, again, I would give this more of a D. He's more of a developmental kind of prospect, but we'll see what happens with him. It's definitely interesting, the moves that they made in day three. Which takes us to the final grade. I would give the Bills a B plus. Did they meet all of their roster needs? I would say yes. Did they draft good prospects? I would say yes. Did they draft prospects that had the data potential to outperform their draft status? Yes. Did the Bills have a decent consistency in terms of drafting prospects in the past and developing them? Absolutely. The Bills have been consistently one of the better drafting teams over the last 5 seasons. In fact, I think they were the best, or at least one of the best teams drafting over the last 5 years. And it shows, they're able to get talent and develop it. So a lot of these prospects, they might be older, but I think you might be seeing some interesting things with them this year with all the prospects they drafted. I think they all have potential to be very good starters. I don't really see any players that really have elite potential. So none of the prospects I mentioned, maybe other than maybe Keon Coleman, might have a chance to be like a Pro Bowl prospect long term. But it was still a very solid class. They had a lot of really good players. So I would say this draft class might be added to the list of past accomplishments. Very good overall draft in terms of value and picks, and I really enjoy it. With all that stuff out of the way, in the comment section below, tell me, what do you think about the Buffalo Bills draft class based on data? Did you like it? Did you hate it? How would you grade it? Hmm? And also check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/jcoburn. Also check out my Twitter, or formerly, well, actually X, formerly known as Twitter account at Geometrics. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.